Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. Thank you for joining me this week. This is part two of Love Doesn't Die, having visits from my family members that have passed on. Today, I'll go over the last two visits from my mother and my father, starting with my mother. My mother was the fourth person to visit me after her passing. She passed a month before my 20th birthday from complications due to pneumonia. At this time, we were living in New Jersey. And during the last few weeks of her life, my mother was in the ICU, part of the hospital. Upon my first visit to see her, the nurse had reassured me that she was not in any pain. I suppose she was trying to put me at ease, as she could tell how I was frightened by the noises and beeps the ventilator made and everything else around her. I was also uncomfortable at the sight of the different cords and bags extending from her body. She remained on the ventilator for the few weeks, and after there were no signs of improvement and an agreement from us, the hospital called to tell us when she was finally removed from the ventilator so that we could come back in and say our final goodbyes. It was soon after that she had passed. It was the morning of her funeral when she came to me in my dream. My mother said exactly to me in my dream, "My throat doesn't hurt anymore," in great relief. There was no particular room setting, just her consciousness stopping by to briefly let me know how good she felt now. And I was very confused by this, as I was assured she felt no pain, as the nurse had advised that one day in the hospital. Now, after the funeral, as we all sat around in my sister's living room reminiscing, I told my godparents about the dream. And my godfather said to me that he knows for a fact that being intubated can be painful. His mother, who was intubated and then later was removed because she was able to breathe on her own, expressed vehemently that she did not ever want to go on that machine and go through that pain again. "Do not let them put me on that machine," she ordered him. I was in shock. This was contrary to what I was told, which was that the machine did not cause her any pain, and by a nurse who calmly told me this with confidence. But what my godfather had told me allowed me to understand, and it was the validation that I needed for why my mother was so happy to tell me this. I didn't see her as being in pain. Other than her illness, she would get sick and be hospitalized for various things. Um, to my knowledge, when she was in the ICU, I guess I assumed that she's not in any pain meant she was on painkillers and she was like sleeping, but she was letting me know she felt better on the other side, and I was happy for her relief. Being sick for many years, I did have solace that she was truly now at rest. Now, my mother visited me again a few months later. I personally felt I hadn't had a proper goodbye. When she did come to visit, the scenery was in this very luscious, very green park. We sat on a bench with her to my left side, and we both faced forward. She then turned to me and hugged me so deeply that I could feel her spirit and the love that we had uh, directly. I felt it throughout my chest. I was both happy and sad that she had to go, but I am ever so grateful for that moment and proper goodbye. She was the kindest, most gentle person I had ever known. She would continue to visit me throughout the years, showing me a home she was decorating with using purple fabrics all around, which was interesting to me because, it was her favorite color. And with each visit, her visits, or I should say her home, became more and more embellished over time with this favorite color of hers. So it was very cool to see that her favorite color on earth also was or is her favorite color in the non-physical. And she's able to use it liberally, just everywhere. It really was a beautiful sight. I had become accustomed to her visits at this point in my life, um, well into my 20s, because she passed before my 20th birthday. Um, and I had not only expected, um, or I should say, excuse me, not only used to seeing her, but expected to be visited by her and any other loved ones who had passed on. This was my new normal. I hadn't lost anyone um, for quite some time until I turned 30. And that person was my father, Daddy. He had a long battle with cancer and passed away when I was 30 years old. Of course, by this time in my life, a visit from him was expected, and I was waiting patiently for him to stop by before continuing on his merry spiritual way. Uh, well, anyway, he died in July of 2011. I believe it was over a year that had gone by after his passing, and I still had no visit from him. Now, by this time, I was frustrated. I could not understand why there was a delay. Surely he would come see me. We were close. And this is why I was disappointed. We were very close, and typically those closest to me would visit. I had him for 30 long years, longer than I had a mom. He was a larger than life personality who loved to tell jokes and make others laugh. He would also tell stories that no one believed, but they were still very entertaining, as they were obviously tall tales or full on embellishments of past events that we just couldn't disprove, so we had to take him at his word. He had a huge speaker quality laugh that filled up large spaces easily and drew people near whenever he sat outside on the bench in front of the building we lived in back in New York City. Of course, no one is perfect, and a father daughter relationship can be a tricky tightrope walk, as it is in many families. My father had enough flaws to fill a 5-bedroom home, but he was my dad, and I missed his presence very much. When he finally said goodbye, his visit was markedly different. I remember being so disappointed that he hadn't said goodbye that one day I posted on my social media account that he had not visited me yet. This was something my family members would understand, as I had mentioned earlier that my older sister also gets visits as well from those who have passed on. Lo and behold, a few weeks later, he must have heard me, because on December 24th, in the middle of the night between the 23rd and the 24th, I woke up to a presence that was applying pressure on the left-hand side of my body. I was asleep in my bed, but the pressure along my left side immediately woke me up. I felt it on my arm and on my left hip. So my left arm and my left hip is where I felt a pressure on my body. I was laying on my back, and when I opened my eyes, it was very dark in the room. My husband was to the right of me in a deep sleep, but I did not have to move my head to look his way. I could see him out of my peripheral vision. And I didn't want to move, as I was trying to understand what was happening as I became conscious. The pressure remained, and then I felt a soft kiss on my left cheek. It was my father's lips. This I know for sure, and the recognition placed me at ease immediately. Quickly afterwards, his presence and the pressure was gone from the room. I thanked him for saying his goodbye and felt relieved that he was okay. The next day I told my husband at the time, but he thought I was imagining the visit. I knew it was real because I was fully awake with my eyes open in our own bedroom. And like I said, I could hear him snoring lightly in the dark. This time it was definitely not a dream, but a visit I had while awake. This is a very special goodbye to me, and I am so grateful that I had the sensitivity to experience it. You know, it is my hope to awaken an awareness within those who have experienced metaphysical occurrences. We sometimes deny what is occurring and explain it away. I hope that instead of denying that these events were real, you can acknowledge them and perhaps carve out the time to unpack any gifts you might already have. Just, as, just as I have stated in the beginning, it took me a while to accept that I am much more than my physical body, as I believe we all are. This journey of awakening began with me looking within closely and without judgment, which takes time. Yes, validation helps and community helps, and trusting yourself is ultimately the best guidance you can ever follow. Thanks for joining me this week. Join me next week when I talk about what it physically feels like to be in deep meditation. Have a great week. Thanks for joining me. Talk to you later.